Welcome to the Hard Faith Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Fulmar. I'm a filmmaker and producer and the founder of Hard Faith. At Hard Faith, we believe life is hard and God is good. And today we have filmmaker, award-winning filmmaker, Peter Iengo. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Peter, we got connected at the first inaugural Hard Faith Fest, New York City, just this past December, and your film, your feature film, One More Time, won Best Picture at our show. Would you share with our audiences how you found out about Hard Faith Fest New York City?
So I utilize Film Freeway,
Mm-hmm.
and on Film Freeway, I was looking for Christian-based film festivals. I am a New Yorker, born and raised. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I was really trying to find Christian faith festivals that were here in New York to celebrate Christian filmmaking. And I came upon your festival here in Manhattan, and I says, "Well, it's Manhattan. I got to do it."
That's awesome. Um, Share a little bit with audiences, and we'll talk more in depth, but just as a little overview, can you share a little bit of the long line and a short summary of One More Time?
Sure. So One More Time is a film about my personal journey of grief. I lost my father in 2020 at the beginning, the height of COVID, April. And I found a faith-based healing group, a grief group. It's an organization called GriefShare. And that organization helped me through Christian faith healing to counsel me through grief. And it also brought me very close spiritually to God and to my religion. And I wanted to make a film that honestly depicted what the grief journey is like, and more importantly, what my journey was like, and what this grief program looks like, and what it does for you. And of course, why we're all here, which is the power of faith and how faith helps you, especially with grief. So the movie very quickly is about a young man who's in his 30s who loses his wife to COVID, and he's dealing with the loss, and he's struggling. He's in a crisis of faith, and he is a part of this grief group organization, which is modeled after and inspired by GriefShare. And the pastor and another member of the group are helping him find his faith and helping him navigate his grief.
Mm.
And we intercut the movie, which is very unorthodox and experimental. We intercut the narrative scenes of the movie with interviews of the pastor and the facilitator of my group, Brian Kay, who runs my GriefShare group, his testimony, his story about grief and the program, and Stuart Sandell, who's a chaplain, and his story with grief, losing his mother to terminal cancer, and being a chaplain, helping people through God, and some interviews from me talking, honestly about my journey.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really powerful film, and I do love that experimental aspect of it, of the interviews and the real life testimonies, plus the narrative story ongoing. As soon as we saw your submission, myself and the judges, we all just thought it was a really beautiful, deep, moving, hard faith film, and we're really honored to share it with our audiences and screen it at the New York Film Festival. It's a New York story. And we're so glad that you were able to come, and your mom came out, and some of the people involved with the film. And tell us, what was your experience at Hard Faith Fest, New York City?
Well, I'll tell everybody watching and listening to your program that you did a wonderful job and you made a beautiful
Thank you.
film festival. I have a history with film festivals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my late 30s now, but I've been a part of festivals since I was 18 years old. And with Cannes in France, and festivals out in Los Angeles, in California, and whatnot, and of course here in New York. And you guys did a great job. You made a beautiful festival. And let's all be honest, it's wonderful to be in Manhattan with a film
Yeah.
festival. It's just such a wonderful backdrop. One of my co-producers, Alan Fox, came, so we had some of the actors in the film, so it was exciting. We had our little entourage. And I think what was nice about this, Spencer, is a lot of the Christian film festivals, they're not really so much here in New York City and here on the East Coast. And like you had just mentioned, we live here. We're New Yorkers, so a lot of the festivals were difficult for us to go to and to attend in person. So what was wonderful about your festival was it really gave us the opportunity to show up in person and finally really be a part of something in person with this wonderful film. So I loved your festival. It was really, really great. I thought, the screenings were wonderful. You had some really great people there talking, and I think that's always great to have guest speakers, talking about the industry and valuable, lessons and tools. It was just a wonderful experience.
Thank you, Peter. It was great communicating with you throughout the entire, submission period and whenever we're getting closer to the festival and programming. And it was great to meet your mom and some of your crew. And the audience were really moved by your film screening. And then you won, obviously, for Best Feature Film. Um, and this film obviously is very personal. What was it like? And I'm sure you've screened this film, multiple times, but what was it like, screening this film with an audience and talking about this movie, the award show? What was the whole experience like, especially with your mom?
Well, what's interesting is that, like I had mentioned
Yeah,
before, a lot of these Christian festivals are out of the state. So
sure.
your festival actually was the first time that we were able to, or for this movie, where we actually finally got to see it like on the big screen.
That's
Um,
cool.
so, we had done some of our own kind of screenings, but it wasn't on a big screen in a theater. So this was like the first time
Mm,
doing this project we got that. So it was really a exciting moment for us to get that experience. But any time that you're able to do this and you're in that type of atmosphere where you get a chance as the filmmaker to see the reactions of the people that you made the film with and also a general audience, it's just it's wonderful. It's heartwarming because you really get to look around and see, you think about story moments and beats and you say to yourself, does that joke land, or does that emotional moment land? let
mm,
me let me gauge the audience and see, are they reacting to that moment? Are they crying at that moment? Are they gasping at that moment? Are they laughing at that moment? So it's really wonderful to kind of see that and say to yourself, does all that work from the writing to the directing and then the editing that you're putting those moments together, do they resonate with the audience? And when you see the reactions, I don't think that there's anything more rewarding in what we do.
I
You
agree.
know, it's just wonderful. And to share, listen, to share that with loved ones, to have my mother there and to share that with her, because remember, this is about losing my father. It's her losing her husband, and we're kind of sharing that real terrible emotion together,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of this is healing too, Spencer.
Mm,
I think doing something like this and being able to share a moment like that with my mother, I think this is just another wonderful part of healing,
mm.
in this grief journey, because it doesn't quite end. We live with it always. We miss that person terribly, but I think this felt like another really, really wonderful healing moment. I do. I do.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes from the late great Carrie Fisher's take your broken heart and make art. And I feel like you did that so well. Obviously, you honored your father and your family so well with your movie. Um, I want to go back to the beginning of your story. You've made many films before this. This is your first faith-based film, but can you share with our audiences how you got into this crazy industry and about some of your films that you made before one more time?
Yeah, I've been in the industry now 20 plus years. I'm in my late 30s, and I've been doing this since, believe it or not, Spencer, high school.
Hmm.
And I went to a performing arts high school where I live in Brooklyn, called Edward R. Murrow, based on the great late Edward R. Murrow. And there was a television production and communication program. And it's where I got my first kind of lessons in education and experience. And when I was a high school senior, we were a part of a Student Emmy category, and we actually won a Student Emmy. And
Wow.
that kind of was the moment where I said, okay, let's do this. Let's pick a college and let's go after this.
Yeah, I'm in.
I'm 100%. The universe is telling me I should do this.
Yeah.
And so, going to college and studying film, it was just such a wonderful experience. And I like to tell people I feel like I'm a product of that education.
Mm-hmm.
And, during that time, I made a lot of films. I was in a lot of festivals. And it's just been this really incredible career. I made a lot of short films back then that were in a lot of film festivals. Two of the short films that I worked on back then were in Cannes in France, in the Cannes Film Festival, which
Wow.
was incredibly big moment,
Oh
big
yeah.
moment. I had done a short film that was in a film festival in LA, which while I was in college, flew out to Los Angeles and experienced like LA and Hollywood for the first time. I ended up winning a short film and a director award for the project. Um, and from that point, I was very excited when I was a student to make a feature film. Even while I was still a student, I was like, let me do a feature. And I had a lot of help from people, and I didn't know what I was doing. Obviously, I was still learning. I had no money. I was a broke college student. I was still fumbling in the dark, as you would say, but it was a rewarding experience. And I made my first feature. We got it into a film festival here called Staten Island. We won a feature award, and we got distribution by a small boutique company called SKD Media, and it got put on DVD. And that felt like, the greatest accomplishment in the world. I felt like a movie star at the time.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I just began a long journey of, working here in New York on set, on TV and film, indie and network, and just being a PA, earning my stripes, meeting people, gaining experience, and still making shorts, still putting them in festivals, still winning awards. And then finally, I got a break, and I got to do these three feature films that they had industry level budgets, industry level producers, celebrities in them. And I was producer on all three of them. I was director on one of them, and they were just life changing projects. They were like, hey, you've arrived type situation, and they were indelible experiences. They won a lot of awards. They took me to a lot of incredible festivals. And then throughout my career, I've taught film. I was a professor for about 3 years, and then later down the line during COVID, I was a teacher here for an organization with the city of New York teaching media. So it's been a wild career. It's
Yeah,
been a wild career. It's been a wild career.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me about the teaching experience. We've interviewed a few other filmmakers who have taught at different times. What did you learn from your students, and what did you learn about yourself through the teaching experience? It's like, you can really only teach something if you know it, and obviously you really know film. You've been making films your whole life, over t
Yeah.
2 decades now. What did you learn most about teaching?
That's a great question. When the first time that I did teaching, to be honest with you, I was too young, and I didn't know enough. I was grateful that they offered me the opportunity, but I think it was too early. It was premature, and I think I kind of lacked the experience that I needed. But still was a wonderful experience because at the time I met a few people that ended up becoming people that came to work with me on professional projects. And
Mhm.
those relationships still exist to today.
Wow.
And one of them was a young girl who was a student of mine and then became a student teacher who has been a co producer on all my films, including One More Time.
Wow.
Um, and it's just been a lifelong thing. But I would say that more recently, when I got back into teaching and I did this program with the city here in New York, that felt good because that felt like now I was in my middle 30s. I felt like I had a really good history and a lot of professional experience, and I felt like I had a lot to give back. And I love that. And it felt so rewarding to
Mm.
be able to do that. And I was so passionate about, just talking film and teaching them film, and seeing younger people and or people for the first time gravitating to this and kind of discovering the wonder of it, and
Yeah.
being able to kind of share that wonder and maybe even kind of direct them and guide them, a certain way with that, and seeing those talents and saying, hey, maybe you'd like this or maybe you'd like that. And what I'll say, Spencer, was when I was teaching during COVID, because we were on lockdown,
Hmm.
um, we were all stuck inside,
Yeah.
and we were all kind of nervous and scared, and didn't really know what tomorrow was going to bring. And I think what was wonderful about these classes was we were doing them remote, but every day we were like meeting with each other, and it almost became like this safe place for
Yeah.
all of us. And we even started doing this like Thursday night movie night, where
Hmm.
like part of the class we would do like a screen share on
Yeah.
on the Google meeting, and we'd watch a movie and then we talk about it, and they all got excited because it was like going to the movies together. And
Yeah.
it was just
That's
it was
sweet.
really, I think it was really special during that time. And again, the gentleman I was talking about earlier, Alan Fox, who was one of the co-producers of him, he was one of my students in during the COVID. And then
Wow.
again, another person that, I created a great friendship with, a relationship with, and then came on professionally work with me. So um, I think teaching, Spencer, helped me tremendously during COVID and my grief.
Yeah.
And I also think that it made me, in large part, a better filmmaker.
Hmm.
I
I,
think that it really did.
I bet. I love that. That's such a great answer. Um, what was at what point did you know that you were going to make a film like One More Time, that you were going to share your own personal story? You know, I it's I've made some films myself that have been personal,
Right.
and it feels a little bit more terrifying than just making a fictional story or like an action film. Um, it has its own challenges. So when did you know that you were going to make a film about such a difficult time of your life? And when did that begin? And what was that like?
So the GriefShare program, one of the things that when you're a part of it, that they a big tool that they use is they recommend that people write what they call a grief letter.
Hmm.
And they kind of frame it as you write a letter to that deceased loved one,
Hmm.
and you try to get all the emotions and feelings and maybe even things that you felt that you didn't get a chance to say that you wanted to before they passed in that letter. And it can be very cathartic. They find that it's very, very helpful. um, I was having a lot of trouble with that,
Hmm.
writing that. And it felt odd to me because, being a filmmaker, being a screenwriter, why am I having trouble with this? This kind of journaling task, if you will,
Yeah.
and one of the things that once my facilitators got used to me, because, I was there, continuing to be there, was they had just recommended to me, well, what if you thought, like, how would you approach this as a screenwriter if you were writing this as one of your films?
Hmm.
And that simple comment and almost advice, and kind of guided me to, I said, well, let me write this as kind of a film, and let me see if I can get out some of those helpful emotions and that journaling that way. And that's how this really started. And then over time, I realized that one of the other, I think, things that they talk about in Grief Share that felt very, very, that hit me very hard was my facilitator had said a lot of times, if you had met God tomorrow, if you had stood before God, if you had stood before Jesus Christ tomorrow, what would you say to them you did with your time and your talents here on earth?
Hmm.
And that hit me hard.
Wow.
And I thought about that, like, wow, profoundly. And I said to myself, you know what? Um, I really think that I'd like to use my talents to tell this story, because art moves people, art
Yeah.
changes people, art helps people. And if I can help other people by seeing this get to GriefShare, ripping that kind of wound open and, making this story about myself, because I think that I don't think somebody else is going to really get it or resonate if they don't see my true story and they don't really see the honest truth.
Right.
They need the honest truth. We
Yep.
need that. So it kind of evolved from those two things, from struggling with the journaling and the grief letters to writing it out, and then them saying kind of that profound message and kind of putting those two together and saying, wow. And then feeling inside like, man, I want to try to help people. I want to try to
Mm.
inspire that hope, and if my story can do that, let me do that, you know. So that's really where that all kind of came from. And I guess, Spencer, also a part of me felt like maybe this would be a little cathartic too.
Yeah.
Maybe this would help me
Yeah.
inside, emotionally, by doing this and working with other people and telling my story and doing this. Maybe that'll be helpful too. Maybe that'll help my grieving and my pain as well, you know?
And has it?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think that all the things that I could talk about, grief share, making the movie, teaching during COVID, I think all those things are like bullet points, if you will, Spencer, of what helped me survive my grief journey.
Mm.
Definitely, because I really honestly can tell you that I cannot imagine how much more difficult it would have been for me without those things, because my father was everything to me.
Mm.
I loved him. We had an incredibly close relationship. He was my best friend. He was my biggest supporter in filmmaking. And so if I didn't have that stuff, I truly don't know what that would have looked like, Spencer. You
Mm.
know, I don't think I would. I don't know. So yes, 100%. I think it's helped me tremendously.
And for our audiences, you shared a little bit that you lost your father during COVID. And then how did you find GriefShare? And for our audiences that aren't familiar with this ministry, can you explain a little bit more about it?
Sure. So, my father, like I had said earlier, he died at the height of this whole pandemic in April
Yeah.
of 2020, when things were really just, absolutely, I want to use the word insane,
Yeah.
and I knew nothing about this, and I tell people that I wasn't even as devout of a believer,
Hmm.
in Christ, in my faith, as I've become thanks to this. So I didn't know about these resources. And the city organization that I was working for with New York City teaching, one of the colleagues that I worked with, I didn't even know this at the time, she had lost her husband several years prior,
Mm.
to a sudden heart attack. And she was a very devout Christian. And she was the one that reached out to me while we were in lockdown and said to me, hey, I went to this, and it like saved me and it helped me and it continues to help me. And she said to me, don't think just because you're not, devoutly religious, or that you're even Christian, because Spencer, I'm Italian, I'm Roman Catholic, so she was like, don't think just because that, you can't go. Um, so she recommended it to me, and um, there wasn't a lot available because of what was going on with COVID. But they had gotten back to me pretty quickly and had given me somebody's contact information that was about to set it up, like via Zoom.
Mm.
Because normally these are in person, these are at, churches, these are at ministries, but they said somebody's about to do this Zoom because of lockdown, and that was Brian, who became my facilitator, and I had reached out to him, and he immediately, had gotten back to me and said to me, hey, listen, please, join us, and this is what's going on. And of course, during all this, I discovered kind of the reality of this like massive thing that's going on. That so many that like I never knew, and so many people I know didn't know. And like me and you have talked about, it's in 28,000 churches.
Yeah. And I'd
And
never heard
you
of it.
know exactly. And
Yeah.
and at the time they're telling me about books like actual books and workbooks and material I'm going to be purchasing. And, there was this just massive, beautiful kind of organization that I had just kind of stumbled into. And it just was incredible. And that colleague at the time, God bless her for recommending that to me, and discovering it, and what I know now,
Mhm. And how soon was it after your father passed did you start GriefShare?
It was relatively very soon.
Mm,
So I want to say that it was probably about maybe I think I'm going to say about 2 months later.
that's great.
About yeah, about I think it was about 2 months later. It was very quick, which is another reason why I said to you before, like I 100% couldn't imagine what I'd be like, because I didn't even hesitate. I dived right into something because I was so shattered and broken. And then of course with lockdown, it was like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How, I can't even get together with a buddy, or I can't do something to try to help with what I'm feeling. So I just, like, as soon as this was presented to me, I had to dive into something, you know. So yeah, so I went into it head first, and I'm extremely grateful that I did, because GriefShare really became, besides the remote teaching that I was doing, it really became like, not just an outlet, but I guess a social, thing for me to do during that. It
Mhm.
was something during that whole experience. So it's just really a tremendous, wonderful group, and support system. And of course, um, who's not grateful and appreciative that they're doing something like this for free too?
Yeah, it sounds like an
So
amazing
all of it,
program.
it is.
For people who are listening to this that are experiencing grief and might be interested in GriefShare, how can they learn more about it, and what is the experience like? It's you're still involved with GriefShare now, right? So what does it
Yes.
look like as far as the process, what it looks like to meet, people who might not look for help as readily as you did, might be hesitant or nervous or shy. Why should they do it? Why should they seek out some kind of help like this? And what is the process experience like?
So obviously, since we're out of that heavy COVID and all that
Yeah.
lockdown, they've returned to the in person. So so what's nice now is, because of what happened in COVID, somebody that's seeking it right now for the first time, they have the benefit that it has two sides to it. Where, what I mean is, where it was only in person, now there's also the online
Hmm.
option. So there's also the meetings that are done via Zoom. You know what I mean?
That's
So
nice.
now somebody that's seeking it, what's nice is, for the first time, they could know that they have kind of these options of finding an in-person one at a ministry, or one online. And basically how you do it is, it's very simple. And again, I'm not affiliated with GriefShare in any way or capacity. I'm just somebody, like you said, I'm on 5 years now. You
Yeah.
know, but I know that it's very easy for somebody. They can go to their website, which is simply griefshare.com. And on the griefshare.com website, there's a telephone number to call to ask them on the phone, or there is an internet database where you can look up with your city, state, and zip code where the nearest in-person GriefShare meeting is, where the nearest one is at a ministry or at a center that it is available, and it gives you all the information how to contact that particular church or ministry, to then ask them about how to join the GriefShare. Or you can contact them directly, and it'll tell you about joining an online one
Hmm.
that's available. So the online website has a phone number, has, like I said, the ability to look up with your city, state, and zip code, so you can find in person and online. They're 100% there to help everybody to find this. Um, and then they have all the wonderful resources on their website of how to buy all their different type of books and journals, and all the additional tools that would
Hmm.
help you, during this process. So it's easy, and of course they're on social media. You know,
Mhm.
they have a wonderful Facebook page, which is like fully updated with all the information as well there, where you can contact them and leave a comment or message them on there. So it's you have your pick of how to find it. And if you are a person, because I'll give you an example. My aunt, my father's sister,
Yeah.
passed away last
Mm.
month,
Wow.
in
Sorry. So
in
sorry.
in December. Thank you. And she'd been having a long battle with chronic illness,
Mm.
and my cousins, her children, um, were looking for something, and one of them is very spiritual, very devout in her life, and I had recommended, immediately our conversations where you got to get in GriefShare, got to get in GriefShare, and again, it's so simple.
Mm.
Like she joined my group, and then she was able to go on and find the churches and the ministries by her, here in New York that had it. And she contacted them, and they told her, if you want to keep doing the online, great, but if you want to come in person, this is when it starts. This is when you could come in person. So it's simple, you know what I mean? It's just go to the website, reach out to them, and find it. And choose what works for you. And I'll say to anyone, as far as the where you are spiritually or whatnot, first of all, they accept people that are any denomination. Let me start there. So any denomination is welcome. And then on top of that, as far as where you are spiritually, people can listen to this and understand that when I started, I wasn't where I am now. It wasn't like I was coming in as somebody that, my whole life was a devout, person of faith. I was in crisis of faith during this process,
Mm.
full crisis, and they welcomed you with open arms. They welcome people that are in crisis with faith to help them. And I don't want anybody to feel that this is like preachy in your face and it's uncomfortable. That's not. This is loving. This
Mm.
is warm, and this is supportive.
I love that. I love that. What a great ministry. It's sounds like a great place for people who like hard faith. And, I think it's so important to deal with grief. One time or another, we're all going to have to deal with it. I don't think typically, it's something that people like dealing with. But I think if you deal with it in a healthy way, like you have, you can find healing quicker and, in a group like that. And even too, just the spiritual awakening you've had through this process sounds like it's been so edifying and beneficial to you. And now you're sharing these resources with others. Um, Peter, what is next for your journey, your filmmaking journey? What are you working on next? What's on the
Yeah.
horizon?
Well, you brought up a good point. What you had just said a couple seconds ago about kind of it bringing me to this place spiritually now, and you know how could you not want to make a movie or make your art when you feel this way, right?
Yeah.
When you feel this passionate, how could you not want to make a movie that you get all this emotions out, all this passions out? How could you not want to do that? And for me, I think that what this has done is what's next, what's on the horizon is it's really pivoted what I saw, the direction and the continued direction of my career, and it's made me take a pause and say to myself, listen, I feel extremely passionate about two big topics. One of them is grief, and the other is faith and God. And there's these huge topics that I'm so passionate about. And they've given me this pause where I've said to myself, I really would love to kind of push my career and my filmmaking in that direction where I could continue to tell stories that are reflective of these topics of faith and of how wonderful that is, and about God and the incredible beauty of our religion and believing in God and the power of faith. But also I feel very passionate and connected to grief. And I know some people may say, that's a dark thing to be attached to, but I don't see it that way, Spencer. I see
Hmm.
that I went through a very profound thing, like you said, something we're all going to go through that
Yeah.
really shakes us to our core. And I really feel like there's so much more to tell because I did this movie with pennies myself independently, and
Hmm.
I feel like there's still so much more to tell in this topic with the right resources and the right partners to tell with both of these topics, the faith and the grief. And that's really where I am right now moving forward is I've worked on developing a story, and that story kind of builds on everything that I've been a part of these last 5 years, and everything that I did with the one more time, and everything that I've gone through that really builds on grief and the journey of that, and this wonderful program, and the power of faith-based healing and finding God, and all of that together. And that's really what I hope to continue to champion, is to find the right resources and partners to really make that movie, to properly get that across, and really help bring people together and show them that hope, and show them that there is hope, and there is help, and there is that message out there. um yeah, that's my focus, and I love the idea of doing that, and hopefully growing in this Christian faith, community of filmmaking. You
Yeah.
know, I,
Yeah.
I I hope to grow professionally in that. Yeah, you know, maybe even go back to some teaching too. I would love to consider that. I don't think when you do those things that those doors are ever closed.
Hmm.
You know, I'm young. I would love to explore, opening that door again. I think I have even more that I've been through to share now
Yeah.
with students. So I think all of that is where I see the future, in some capacity for myself. That's my hope for what's next.
Brilliant. If people want to follow along with your journey, see one more time, learn more about you, where can they follow you? Either social media or websites, anything like that. How can they follow along on your journey?
Sure. So, to follow along with one more time, it's very easy. We're on social media, so you could follow one more time on its official Facebook page, which is One More Time Movie. So just One More Time Movie, and you can easily, like the page, follow it. All of our up-to-date information is on there about the movie, its past festivals, etc. As far as seeing it, I would say, Spencer. I never saw it being distributed because I always saw this as maybe a tool to help me get to the to get to people wanting to help me do this with more resources and get it. But if somebody was so inclined to maybe distribute what we have so far, sure. If that happens, then certainly that information will be also on the Facebook page. And me, you can find me, all on social media. Follow my Facebook and my Instagram, Peter Iengo, follow me. And, also my company, Indelible Films. You can follow that online on Facebook, and on the internet. We have our own website. So, I'm there. I'm there. You can follow along.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for attending the Hard Faith inaugural film festival in New York City, and for submitting your beautiful film one more time and sharing your story with our audiences. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Spencer. Thank you. Thanks a
Thank you.
lot. Wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the Hard Faith Podcast. If this conversation was helpful, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who cares about faith, art, and honest storytelling. You can learn more about Hard Faith at hardfaith.org. Please subscribe and share.